All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 114 of The Hideout, where we will be discussing Web3 gaming and the Metaverse. My name is Nick Frontera, and I am one of the founders of Apollo Entertainment, the company behind the Satoshiverse and the Legions 2029 game. We've got an awesome panel again today, stacked with Web3 founders and builders across the space, so definitely going to get into some exciting conversation and had some questions covering different topics. For those of you who are not familiar with Satoshiverse, we've been building for about 4 years. We started off as a comic collaboration between us and Jose Delbo, who was a 70-year Marvel and DC comic artist, and then turned into one of the more successful crypto artists in the space during the early boom. We worked with him to create a story about Satoshi, who came back as a superhero to defend the world against the defenders of fiat, who are villains. And then off of that, we released various avatar collections. And for the last 2.5 years, have been building our free-to-play, high-fidelity PC game, Legions 2029. That's all I'll say about it for now. We've got a lot of exciting stuff coming up, and you can check it out in the pinned tweet that I have pinned to the top of the spaces. If you are into Web3 gaming, definitely a community you'll want to check out and something you'll want to see. It's all free to play, and there's lots of things you can win. We have tournaments, we have NFT prizes as part of our Battle Pass, and we just announced that our Season 2 is coming soon. We'll have dates on that very soon, but you'll have more opportunities to win cool stuff as part of Season 2. So now's a great time to join, but with that, what I want to do is introduce our panelists. What we'll do is I'll call on you, and then if you could just do a quick introduction. If you have visuals, whether it's gameplay videos or anything other that's visual, please feel free to pin it to the top of the spaces and so that everyone can see. But with that, let's jump over to our guests. Why don't we start with Zip Clash? Welcome to the spaces.
Hello. Testing 1, 2, 3. Do you guys hear me?
Yes, we do. Loud and clear.
Amazing. My name's Marcello. I'm the head of spaces here at Zip Clash. I just got back actually from GDC, so I'm still riding that wave, but super happy to be here. Quick introduction. Zip Clash is a farming/cooking simulator game that you will find on mobile, currently on Android. You'll soon be able to play it on iOS very soon. Ultimately, think of any other cooking simulator game, just better. You get to actually earn. So in terms of earning, right? We've heard of play to earn. We've come up with our own model called cook to earn, baby. So you get to essentially earn some points in the game and then use it for real world vouchers. So think of playing the game. You earn these beautiful points and then you get to have some IRL in real life utility by actually going to some of your favorite spots. Soon you'll be able to use it for Uber Eats. Think of going to Starbucks. Think of going to McDonald's. Think of all the beautiful places you'd like to eat, but using our game as a means of getting this value. So yeah, that's a quick little pitch about what we're doing. I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having us.
Sounds awesome. Love to hear it, and I'm excited that we'll get to dive in a little bit more into that blend between gaming and real world utility. So excited to dive in. Let's hop over to X Rocket. Welcome to the spaces.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yep, you sound good.
Yeah. So my name is Archie. I'm head of community and growth at XRocket. XRocket is a CX and a social platform, but not just a CX and a social platform. We are a CX and a social platform that runs just inside Telegram. So you don't need to install any apps. You don't need to go anywhere, long registrations and whatnot. You just open the bot, open a beautiful Telegram mini app, and you can trade tokens. So that's the CX part. Also, there is a social part, which might be of interest for all the projects that have strong and active Telegram community. Because with our tools, you can distribute tokens to active people in the chat. You can send them directly crypto, and again, right in Telegram. So it's like a very complicated thing for those who are not familiar with it. So I won't be diving deep into it. Anybody who's interested can reach out and I'll tell them more. We're happy to be here among the legends and let's have a great show. Thank you.
Amazing. Well, welcome to the spaces again, and we are excited to dive in and learn more as well. How about we jump over to Dan Chan at DNA Racing?
Hey, good morning, afternoon, wherever the hell you are, I guess. So I'm from DNA Racing. Was actually a tool builder. I built a lot of tools for professional sports bettors, and I did some stuff for Zed Run back in the heyday of Zed Run. I built some tools for analysis of racing and different things like bets and stuff for Zed Run. And then I went out and founded my own game and did DNA Racing, which is basically it's a really unique game, and the environment is a little bit different than anything out there. It's got a little degen, a little bit of betting in it as far as like paying to enter races and then winning prizes from the races that you enter. But it also has some very game dynamics to it, some very game mechanics. It has individual quests where you race against robots, and you have some other forms where you're earning like XP in the form of like, we call it TP, but it's actually XP. You can use that to buy cosmetics and do some other stuff. And then we have some other stuff where you can do like trails where you complete like a bunch of different missions. We have faction agents, which are like robots that actually earn points for racing and they compete against other factions. So it goes from just being a purebred racing game, which it truly is, and into like a betting kind of true game experience.
Sounds amazing. Well, I am definitely excited to dive in and hear more. Let's go over to our last speaker on the panel, John Enos. Welcome to the Spaces.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's actually Ennis, like tennis, just
Ennis,
wherever that's
got
worth.
it. Sweet.
Yeah,
Sorry
yeah.
about that.
It's all right. I heard a lot of that in my childhood, so no problem. Yeah, but I'm John Ennis. I'm CEO of Tool, and we're doing AI-powered matchmaking, and we work a lot with Star Atlas on Solana. So I can maybe share a thread here about our chatbot interface to our tools. Yeah, I'll share that in just a second. But yeah, happy to be here. I think that gaming is a great place to test all sorts of ideas for, real world use in addition to having its own value. And, I play a fair amount of VR games with my wife, and I see I can't wait for these ideas from Web3 to make their way into the VR space. So that's it.
Amazing. Yeah, no, I'm also very into what's emerging on the VR side, and it still feels so young. I remember going to VR conventions back in 2017, and that, it's evolved quite a bit from there, but probably not as fast as I would have hoped it would have. And we've got some awesome stuff coming. But yeah, I think matchmaking, I'm really curious to hear more about how you guys are using AI for matchmaking, and that sounds awesome working with Star Atlas. Great project at doing some pretty cool things. So definitely
Yeah,
excited
thanks a lot.
to dive in. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, please do share anything you have at the top of the spaces. Let's jump over to Spencer on the Hideout account to take us away with questions.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? I am Spencer. I am the business development manager here with Satoshiverse and the Hideout and Apollo Entertainment. So excited to be here, and yeah, we'll be asking all of the questions on today's space. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. So first thing I'm going to do is pin a tweet to the top of the space. So the tweet that I just pinned that says "We're live," that is for the giveaway that we do every week on the Hideout. So we're giving away 5 Satoshi's crystals, which is one of the main in-game resources within our game Legions 2029. Very important resource that allows you to upgrade your in-game items and skins and characters and all of that. So very, very important. In order to enter that giveaway, all you have to do is repost that tweet that I just pinned to the top that says "We're live," and then just stick around until the end of the space when we choose a winner. So good luck to everyone who enters. Moving on. So to get into the format of the space, so going to start out with a group discussion question. I'll call on someone to start, and then feel free to just jump into the question from there, and no need to raise hands or anything like that. Then we're going to do some individual questions for each of you guys, and then if we have time again at the end, we'll do another group question. Cool. So moving us into that first group question, and maybe Zip Clash, you could start us out on this one. So what level of decision making should players have in Web3 games? Should they influence core mechanics, story, economic policies, everything? Kind of, where do you think that stands?
Yeah, no, I think this is a great question. I do think this kind of goes on a case by case situation where I think every game might want to roll differently, but I would say that is definitely one of my favorite things about Web3, right? I think it's just the barrier of entry being so low compared to a lot of especially the traditional gaming industry, right? I jump into a Discord. I'm going to speak to founders. They're actively on Twitter Spaces. Many times they'll do play tests, and you'll be a part of it and be with the core team, and they'll hear your feedback. These are all amazing things. As myself as a gamer, I would have only dreamed of being in the same Discord as the founder of World of Warcraft or some of my favorite games. The barrier of entry was just so high; it was nearly impossible to get any feedback or to have such a close connection with the core team, So I think that's a massive advantage that we have in Web3. Personally, when done correctly, I think it's a great advantage to really build that connection with your community and hear that feedback in real time and make them feel like they're heard. At the same time, I do also think it's important to have a boundary, right? I don't think the community should dictate every single decision making that goes on behind the scenes, right? So I think it's being able to draw that line, but still being able to make your community feel heard, which I think is very important, but also knowing on what feedback to take seriously and what feedback to essentially cast aside, right? But I think that the advantage that we have is that in this industry we're really able to build in real time with the community, right? In Web 2, a game comes out and it goes straight to market and then that's it. In Web 3, there's so many games that build alongside with their community. I've played tons of games that I've been able to be part of their first play tests, and it's just great being able to give my feedback in real time and having the founders there. Whether it's up to them, like I said, whether they decide to go with it, that's really up to them. But I do think that is an advantage, and being able to kind of build alongside with your community and use your feedback realistically, I think more projects should lean in on that, and I do think that's a massive advantage. So yeah, I do think it's a case by case situation. Should games be taking everything seriously and all the feedback and just start integrating whatever the community says? No. But should they use this as an opportunity to maybe get closer to the community and, pick and choose what makes sense to them? Absolutely. And I think that using that very, very strategically will only build a stronger community. We talk all the time in Web3 about how much community is important. And I think that this is definitely an avenue that we have such an advantage of, and I've never seen this before and with any other games in the traditional gaming industry. So I think when done correctly, it could be very much used very well to build a stronger community, and if anything, maybe even improve the game because, there's that saying, the customer is always right. I don't know if they're always right, but many times they can be. And when you get the feedback straight from the community, I think you could do some really great things. So yeah, that's what I think about that.
Anyone else want to jump in on this one?
Well, I can add some things like we're seeing with, well, first off, when it comes to level of influence, to some extent, that could be a variable that different games compete on. It may be a selling point of one game that there's more community involvement. But I think, as we just heard, you obviously want to have community input. And one of the things I think is interesting is you're seeing more and more of these kinds of in-game co-pilots or in-game companions that one of the benefits of AI is it makes it much easier for users to ask for the things that they want. Like for example, with Theo, we're going to be working with the Star Atlas team to help bring Theo into the game. Right now, it's standalone on our site. It's kind of a helper chatbot that can help people buy and sell things, get information about the game, that kind of thing. And one of the surprising things about making a helper chatbot is those conversations are actually extremely informative about what it is that users are actually trying to do in the game. And I think the more that you have these intelligent agents that are helping players in the games, the more those requests are going to inform the game development. So you can have, direct involvement with the founders, the community Discord, but I think you're going to see more and more of that interaction happening inside the games, and you're going to have these kinds of intelligent interactions with in-game entities where people are going to be asking for things. How do I do this? Where do I go to do that? And if they're asking for something that the game can't currently do, and a lot of people are asking for it, that's a very strong signal that the game needs to do that thing. For example, my wife and I, we play Dungeons of Eternity, which is a VR game. And, you go on the Discord and it's a lot of people asking, how do I trade items with people? And you can't. And, that's a strong signal. Now, it's even better when it's within the game itself. Right in the moment, someone's asking, how do I do this? Well, when a lot of people are asking for that, that's very informative. So I think these intelligent agents are going to come into games. People are going to interact with them. And those interactions are going to help inform the game development in a very kind of ecologically valid way.
Yeah, absolutely. I can kind of build on what's been said because I totally agree. I think there's kind of this spectrum, that we see in Web3 gaming, and I think with at least with some of the smaller, more niche projects that have emerged in the Web3 gaming space. And when I say that, I probably am including some of the biggest names in Web3 gaming as still smaller projects, relative to some of the titles that are coming out from AAA studios. There's a little bit of a different calculus when it comes to who the primary stakeholders are in the development of these games. And what we've seen for a lot of Web3 games, kind of for better or for worse in some cases, is that they've emerged out of funding models that were fueled by kind of a distributed community participation. And because that community participation is done through Web3, we have this way of measuring stakeholder, influence or allocating, I guess, points to opinions, right? In a weird way. And so like the way that DAOs, for example, have emerged in the Web3 space generally, I think is an interesting model that could be applied to game development and feature requests and feedback, because we have this stakeholder model where stakeholders are directly able to invest in kind of the well-being of, at least on the funding side of these games, and you're able to see, okay, well, if I'm someone who's put, $100,000 into a project I really believe in through various different means, maybe I'm able to influence the development of that project more. Maybe not. Maybe that doesn't make sense for a particular type of project. But Web3 essentially gives us the means to do that. If you look at the kind of traditional gaming industry, it's similar to the role of the publisher, right? Who's the entity that's going to fund a lot of the development of the game, but also take the game to market. And there may be features that the developer thinks are super important or super interesting for the game, but for one reason or another, the publisher doesn't think that they're viable or don't think that they should be the focus in terms of a successful product, right? Something that ultimately is going to make revenue or recoup investment. And those things get nixed, right? Those things don't necessarily make it into the game. And I think what we have is a way of allowing the, cutting out that publisher role in a lot of senses and allowing the community to have a direct stakeholder impact. And I think Web3 allows us to do that very directly. And I'll kind of shut up there because I see Dan Chen has his hand up. So we'll jump over to you, and then maybe XRocket, if you want to comment, feel free.
So I think of it a little bit differently. I use it more in a dynamic sense to engage users and also to find maybe where users are doing things that we're not doing or we're not doing on a regular basis. It's really easy to add a button somewhere, for example, and say, okay, this button's a great idea. Put it right in the middle. And if you're not playing the game 10 hours, 12 hours, 18 hours a day, that button makes sense. If you're there 18 hours a day and you're clicking that button on accident 20 times a day, the statistics say, hey, the people love that button. They're clicking it all day. But in reality, they're accidentally clicking it because it's right in the middle of their way and it's blocking what they're doing. So I definitely want users to give me information to know to do things like that. Now, fundamentally, also the other side of the thing, token of the same kind of argument is I want my users to feel engaged. If I add some kind of feature and maybe I just take a very small, tiny sliver of what they're trying to input, I take that information and I add it to the game somehow, some way. Now the user feels engaged. Now they're more committed. And it's going to make it a little bit harder for them to step away from the game, or, it creates a more of a stickiness. They feel like they have some ownership in it. So it's really important to include that part of it. And the other thing too is you shouldn't really be tweaking game mechanics for what users want, because users are very centered on what they're successful at, right? If they're really good at a certain format, they're going to just keep telling you every day that you need to have this format. This should be the key format. So you got to kind of be careful to make sure that you understand what the user is after, and make sure that whatever you're adding or changing for that user is something that benefits the game, not just particularly one user.
Yeah, I think that's, it's an interesting point, and I think it's a point that can be more expansive in Web3 communities, which is sometimes the loudest voices aren't always the majority ones, right? And you get into a forum for a game and 2 or 3 people who are very passionate about the game but may very much dislike a certain feature. They may be the only 2 or 3 people that are very much disliking that feature, but they are the ones that are yelling about it in the Discord. And when a game only has 50 people actively talking in the Discord about the game, then those 2 or 3 voices are going to really stand out. And as a game developer, you might be like, oh shit, well, no one's telling them they're wrong, so they must be right. Right. And I think one of the cool things about Web3, depending on how you do it, is you can actually, ask people, well, are they right? And there's a way of weighing opinions, and maybe everybody's opinion is given the same amount. Or maybe you are, for example, incentivizing in some, private way, right? Like maybe it's not like KYC, whatever, and, some of the things that you have to do to be an official game tester of a AAA game. But maybe every time a player plays your game, they're earning a little bit of a resource. And through that, you can see, oh, well, this player has X amount of resources. So they've either played the game a ton or they spent some money to acquire these resources. Maybe I should give a little bit more weight to them because I know they've been playing the game. Maybe this isn't, an FPS player who steps into a hack and slash game and says, oh, you know what? I really like the idea of this game, but I really wish it was an FPS, right? And because then I'd be good at it. And then they go into the Discord and say, hey, you really should add those FPS features. Well, maybe that person only played for an hour because they're not into hack and slash games. And you're getting a very skewed opinion, like you were saying, Dan Chen. And I think that there's ways of measuring that through Web3. And I think we're going to, kind of to John's point, there's also maybe it's not Web3, maybe it's these AI agents, but maybe there is this way of saying, okay, we're consistently seeing this thing come up. And it's not just that this thing is coming up in, a chat room, right? Like you were saying, maybe it's coming up in the context of a help request. People don't know how to do this thing. And so, yeah, maybe your UI sucks or whatever it is. And that's why people can't figure out. And maybe it's a simple change and then you just do it. But maybe it is a feature. Maybe it's like, well, we've got 3 months of budget to do either X or Y, and we need to make a decision on what the users really want. The data is telling us one thing, but maybe we can't trust the data for whatever reason. Maybe we need to take this to the community and see. And that's where, you have all these really interesting, voting methods that can be implemented through Web3 that I think could go a long way in defining how some of these smaller projects.
What I do is I have leaderboards, right, for different types of events, and it has a plus minus system where people thumbs up, thumbs down. So that gives me a good idea of like which ones they liked and didn't like, right? Without having to actually engage or get involved or even being in Discord or chat, right? They just thumbs up, thumbs down. Sorry to interrupt.
No, I think that's, it's another great method. And it's interesting, right? Because I think as Web3 game developers, we have this desire to try to push Web3 into every aspect of everything, right? But in reality, sometimes a vote can be as simple as a thumbs up, thumbs down. That doesn't have to be a Web3 thing. Or you could even, you could hybridize it where it's like, oh, well, if you have this certain NFT, you can get into this Discord voting channel. Like that's what we do with some of our stuff, and then you're just selecting option 1, 2, or 3 with emojis, right? And we'll run those activities to keep people involved. But I think, for me, there is something very important about how a game is funded. And I think the reality of it is if you are a VC backed game with major investors, the way you're going to think about community input will likely be very different than if you are an indie studio that was funded kind of based on some sort of community raise or even through a GoFundMe or something like that, right? I think that there are models that can evolve out of that concept where, yeah, if you're building a game for a publisher and the publisher is the one paying for it, there's only so much you can do as a developer, to make the game what the community wants, because ultimately the publisher should be in tune with that, but they have the final word, right? If you're an indie studio that's building something based on community funding and the community is telling you, hey, we really want this in some measurable way, you should probably listen, right? Because those are the ones that are allowing you to kind of survive and keep doing the awesome stuff that you're doing. And then if you're doing things in a different way as a Web3 company, I think you got to measure that balance. But no matter what, I think the takeaway here is that community participation is key, and everything's kind of along a spectrum. So anyone feel free to jump in and add to that. But otherwise, we can kick it back to Spencer to take us into the individual questions.
I just wanted to add something. I've been in video games like 20 years ago or something. And now looking at what's happening at Web3 gaming, I'd say that it's a golden age for the user, for the end user, for the players, because Web3 gaming is now mostly sort of indie, right? There are not that many AAA titles. And while things are indie, you can, like, as said earlier, touch the developers, hook up with the team, hang out in the spaces. And from the point of the user, this experience is actually priceless. And like having our little sandbox, because we're very early in so many ways when we're talking about Web3, Web3 gaming, Web3 metaverses and whatnot. So I think that the best thing is for those who are looking, like who are playing games and who want to like get involved, maybe build a career or something, going to Web3 gaming, chatting with the devs, hanging out with the team and the community, it's the best time, which might not ever happen again, but now it's like,
Yeah, 100%. This is definitely a special moment, in the life cycle of Web3 gaming. And I think you're right in that it's going to evolve, and we may not have that small, niche feeling when Web3 kind of turns into what I think a lot of us think it will be, which is just a back end infrastructure that nobody talks about, but that enables certain things to be done in games, and there's not this huge divide between Web3 and Web2, and there's just this concept that emerges of asset ownership and incentivization within games in a meaningful way, right? And if that happens, and we do see the AAA founders aren't all of a sudden going to become accessible just because they're creating a Web3 game, unless they need to be, right? And so I think, what we're seeing as part of this is just the funding vehicles lead to accessibility, because these game developers live or die by their community. And so that obviously needs a certain level of accessibility. And I think that those founders are smart to make themselves accessible. In fact, I don't think I would probably want to be part of a project where the founders weren't making themselves accessible. But I also play games where, Web2 games where the founders aren't. And that at the end of the day, is because they're great games, and those games interest me on their own, level. Do I wish those founders would be more accessible? Sure. Do I wish there were ways I could own my items and trade them and do all the cool things I can do in Web3 games? Of course. But we're not there yet. And does that mean that I'm not going to play the new Diablo game or Grand Theft Auto when it comes out? Of course not. I'll probably play them a lot. And that's because, there's still this gap in quality of games and just what we're seeing. But I don't think it's always going to be that way. And I think that you're right, that this is just a special time.
Well, all right. Great discussion on that one. But let's move it along to individual questions here. So the first one is going to go to John. And I know you already talked about a specific use case in that last question, but maybe what other use cases for AI do you think will be most impactful within Web3 gaming?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things really interesting about games is that they often end up prototyping things for the real world eventually. And I think the in-game trading is really going to get revolutionized over the next year or two, where, something a lot of people don't realize is that traditional buying and selling is often not the most efficient way to trade items. And barter doesn't scale. And so you have all sorts of problems with barter. But it is actually possible to find multi-way trades in groups where you give up some items you don't want, you get some items you do want, maybe you get some money, maybe you give away some money. And that form of commerce has been known about for a while, but it's never really been able to find its way into the world because it's very difficult to collect the sort of information you need to find those trades. And I think that we are finally at a place where we've got, through natural language interface, a way to capture, to work with users, figure out what their goals are, make predictions, and capture their intentions in really natural conversation. Like, hey, I'm trying to give up the stuff. What can I get for it? Or I'm looking for these things. How can I get it? And an assistant could say, well, if you're willing to give up these other items, then I can get those things for you. That sort of personalized brokerage where you can, through natural language, start to figure out, help people figure out what they want to do and then help them do it. That's going to find its way into games in the next few years. And you're going to see trading inside games become way more efficient. And you're going to have kind of intelligent inventory management where people will basically give permission to agents where they say, look, these are a bunch of items I don't need anymore. Just get what you can. You know me, get what you can for it. And those agents are going to trade with each other in multi-way trades. It's going to happen under the hood. So I think that you're going to see economies in games become much more personalized, and it's going to be much easier to buy and sell. Trades are going to be, from your perspective, more valuable, and that's going to happen in games first, and then it's going to spill out into the real world. So that's the thing I'm kind of most excited about, is seeing how AI and Web3 together. Because the thing about Web3 is it's all fine and well to know what the user wants to do, but you need permission to do it, and that's where Web3, the smart contracts, they allow us to capture very complex permissions, which can then be executed against. So I think that eventually Web3 is going to have really transformative effects on the kind of real economy, but it's going to happen first in games. And it's going to be really exciting the next few years in gaming to see all of these efficiencies make it much, much easier for people to accomplish their goals. And actually, that's going to lead to a whole level of strategies that's going to be one level higher, because a lot of the problems that we're used to are going to be gone. Just like in coding right now, a lot of the traditional problems in coding are getting solved by AI, so people are having to go one level higher. I think you're going to see economic strategies that are one level higher as well as a result.
That's super interesting. The idea of AI agents actually just trading stuff I don't want. I mean, that's just like has the economy booming when people aren't even around, and just like create so many more options. I think that's a great idea.
You're going to see NPCs trading stuff too, and that'll be really interesting as well. That they'll have their own goals and they'll be acquiring things and trading them. I think you're just going to see you're going to see the volume, double, triple inside games.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, right? When you think about some of the old RPGs and how those, I mean, because in the old days you could trade or buy and sell with NPCs, and it was very simple. But those were building blocks of the early gameplay experience in games like Diablo or some of these other like deeper RPG games where when you're not good enough to trade with the players because you don't have good enough items, the NPCs are who you interact with, and the ability to level that up, right? Because we already are used to it as gamers to some extent, and to level that up with items with real world value, I think is where Web3 comes in, because the consequences of the trade are much greater in that case, right? When if you look at a trade of a crappy item in Diablo for a little bit of gold that eventually just gets scaled out of the game progression, but is important to your early progression in the game, you can do all that just with ones and zeros and kind of algorithms that very like unintelligently calculate the value of whatever you're selling in and whatever's coming out. But I think when you get to where you're saying is, hey, this item may have value. This may be a $50 item, which is in game sense is a very real value for an item. Go trade it, go use it. Don't sell it for $4, right? Don't get an item that's practically worthless in return for it. You need a much more a higher level of thinking in the AI, and the AI needs to be able to function much higher. I also think that there's going to be this combination of that and liquidity solutions being built. So kind of one of the things we're working on is something like that, where we're thinking about how liquidity works in games and how tokens can be used to create more liquid trading environments in games, because I think that's one of the big issues in Web3 gaming. And I've heard kind of different ways in which AI can kind of smooth over liquidity issues, especially helping to solve issues with fragmentation, which I think are a huge problem right now. And when we talk about interoperability, how do things function even between games? Because when we talk about Web3, the gaming ecosystem has now expanded beyond just trading within one ecosystem. Maybe you could take that principle of AI agents trading, and you could tell the agent, hey, your goal is actually not to make my character better in this game. Maybe you're telling the agent, hey, I kind of want to start playing this other game, and I've got all these items. Like, see what you can do about getting me some good items in this other game with the items I have in this game. And you one or two levels of complexity, you swap into one token, swap into another token, and then do the trades, and now you've got a game rig for this new game that you're about to play, and you haven't even played it yet. You didn't even have to learn the game because the AI already knows the game, it knows the values, all that stuff's there. So I mean, what you're saying can, I think, be built upon and built upon and built upon, and I totally agree that that's going to trickle into the real world. In fact, my thesis is that not only will the economics trickle into the real world, but gaming itself with AR and VR is just going to permeate into everything we do on a daily basis. You go to the mall to buy a t-shirt, that experience can be gamified. And there's no reason why that gamification can't also include Web3 or AR, and I really believe that it will in the future. And the way we think about gaming will be really just a lot of daily interactions that we do. Life will become a game because it's more fun. And if more fun leads to more money for retailers, retailers will adopt the method that is more fun. And that's, what we've seen over the years. And I think it's what we'll continue to see. So definitely appreciate the insight on that one.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Moving on to the next individual question to ZipClash. So ZipClash has integrated IRL rewards into its game. So how do you think more tangible rewards compare to cryptocurrency or NFTs in terms of motivating player engagement and retention?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that, a lot of us here, I think, would, definitely being in Web3, we're really excited about some of the rewards in crypto. I think it speaks more to the Web3 degens. Although I'm not so sure it speaks to everyone else in the world that isn't a degen like us. So I think that real world rewards definitely speak to a larger audience that a lot of people might be more interested in, right? In this case, when we have our whole with our whole cook to earn model, everybody loves food, right? And I think that it's much easier to almost, I don't even want to use the word sell, but it's much easier to sell to a much larger audience with the idea that, look, if you play this game, you could unlock some gift cards that you could then use at Starbucks, rather than, hey, you might get some cryptocurrency, which, I mean, I think with the landscape that we're in, I think more people are open to it maybe, but we're still not at that place that, people are lining up to get crypto for playing a game on a mass scale at least. So I think that, the whole model or incentivizing or rewarding users and players or your community essentially with real world rewards, I think will really go a long way and opens up the door to a much larger pool of people that I think could get behind, the whole monetization side of the Web3 that we really love, while also speaking to a larger audience of people that, they just want to play a fun game, but if they could just so happen to also win some rewards in the form of, whether it's a gift card or whatever other rewards we might give them, I think that it speaks to a larger demographic of people that might want to get behind it. So I'm all for it. I think it's exciting, and I think that, it also diversifies things, right? I think crypto is great as well. I wouldn't mind getting rewarded in that, but maybe not everybody's interested in that. But if maybe you told them they get a gift card to their favorite restaurant, now that might be more interesting for more people, and it removes the whole crypto side of things, the Web3 lingo that we use that automatically turns off a very large portion of people. I think that, we're really opening it up, the doors to a lot more people and a lot more folks that might get behind a lot of these games, just knowing that they might get a gift card or any other vouchers or any other type of reward that may not be a cryptocurrency. So yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, and I think that touches on a really good point about just, what the role of crypto in games can be. And I think it's kind of what we were talking about before, is that things can operate along a spectrum, right? Like maybe it's just a Web2 game and you're giving people points and they're able to use those points to claim rewards, or maybe it's direct rewards, and then, you don't need Web3. But maybe it's just one degree higher than that. And it's the Web3 is there, but completely abstracted away. And those points are just points, and they're, able to be used for a particular reward. But then maybe in the future, there's something else that's happening there, and there's something else that you're measuring or using the Web3 for, or, it's somehow funneling into a sustainable, revenue model. Because I think that's the other side of this equation is, and I think we say this every week, at the end of the day, there's only as much value as the game creates, right? Or as the community playing the game creates. And Web3 at the end of the day in a sustainable way is not about necessarily creating more value, although it can potentially be used for that. It's really about deciding how that value is distributed, right? And a game can't sustainably offer $20 gift cards forever unless they're covering the costs of those $20 gift cards in some way. And so I think that at the end of the day, you have to be thinking, okay, how does doing this particular thing expand the pot of value that can then be redistributed to the community? And so if that's a cryptocurrency, in order for it to be sustainable, if the currency can be traded at a certain valuation, and that's what you want to support, you have to be creating enough, value outside of the speculation around that currency to support that value, and that has to get pumped in and distributed to the holders and the users in a different way. Otherwise, that's, those currencies really don't have value, and there's not really a system that can sustain. And we've just seen that time and time and time again, that these gaming cryptocurrencies go up to massive valuations that are totally disproportionate from the amount of value that the project is actually creating. So I think, one of the cool things with what you guys are doing, for example, with, tangible real life rewards, is it's very hard to speculate on the value of a $20 gift card to your favorite restaurant. It's probably worth about $20 to you at best, right? Because it's a gift card to a restaurant that you like. So, now that cryptocurrency might be worth $20 today, but you may be thinking, oh, I hope that this is going to be worth $100 tomorrow, and it may actually be worth $10 tomorrow, right? Whereas that $20 gift card is going to be worth $20 to you. And so I think that, doing that allows for more predictable and sustainable business models to emerge. And then I think the question is just, how does this incorporate Web3 in a meaningful way? And if it doesn't, great, it's a Web2 game. But if it does, even better, right? That's what we need to be doing, what we need to be thinking about. And I think far too few Web3 games are really understanding that concept, that this isn't about necessarily creating value through a token. It's about distributing value through a token. And, the value has to be created elsewhere. And I think once that concept really takes hold is when Web3 gaming is really going to start to flourish. But we haven't seen a ton of it, even in the most successful Web3 games thus far. So hopes.
Awesome. Thank you. Next question is going to go to XRocket. So how does XRocket's seamless integration with Telegram enhance user experience compared to standalone cryptocurrency exchanges?
Well, the thing that I wanted to add to previous speakers, when we stop saying Web3, when we stop saying crypto and other those gibberish words for for the early adopters of just doing things, then we are going to make it. So in our particular case, imagine that I can just send you some tokens in our DMs on Telegram. Just easy as that, without any extra steps. You will just receive some tokens. They look like numbers for you, okay, some numbers, okay. But those numbers have value because I can send you USDTs or USDCs, or I can send you a project token. Now, the next thing that we are all struggling a bit, really, is on-ramping and off-ramping into and out of crypto. And when this will be seamless and under the hood, it will be just perfect. Like Zipclash saying that they are distributing gift cards to restaurants. Crypto and Web3 helps to transfer the value between people easy, right? Because it's kind of hard to pass the gift card from one person to another. It should be physical, maybe a QR code or whatnot. Is it true or is it false? Maybe it's a fake, and Web3 helps in that as well, right? So, and speaking of us as a CX, but maybe it's more important speaking of us as a social fi tool, as a social fi platform for we help to transfer value from one person to another. We help projects like XRocket started when our founder thought that he needs to build a tool that will help the founders of Telegram based projects to deliver tokens to their community easy without dancing around and jumping through various hoops, some of them with fire, some with spikes, but easy, right? So I think that it's essential that each project is contributing to making crypto easy, in general, right? So, and while Telegram had integration of Tom network to a point, but then Apple and Google came around and said that, guys, you can't just use your own token to distribute value, to sell and buy goods. You should use another currency, which is stars. I'm not sure even if the people in the audience know about the stars that are in Telegram. So they forced Telegram to use stars because they can have those 30% of the commission to App Store and Google Play, right? And that kind of a bit stopped the evolution of blockchain integration in Telegram. But still there are bots. Still what we are doing, it's official. Nobody can ban us because we do not sell stuff. We provide a platform to trade it. And I think that if you have a Telegram community, if you're in Web3, you should definitely look on the solutions that we provide. There's some other projects that provide some kind of similar stuff, but it's and a fantastic feeling to see when one of our team members jumps into the chat and makes a fire. It's a plus fire command, which distributes a certain amount of token. You choose how many amongst the active community members during the past 24 hours. The algorithm selects 30 to 50 people and divides and distributes the tokens between them. And again, right that minute, those tokens are in the account and people can use them. So I think that with different platforms, projects, protocols, and whatnot, who are making these tiny steps of making crypto easier, right, will make the adoption like faster. And this will affect everything from games to investing and stuff. Like, come on, look at the DeFi project and try explaining DeFi to your parents. And maybe try to explain it to your grandparents. You are doomed. It's like 100%. So until it's easy, we are kind of but we keep building, and with each update, I think that everybody is making this experience less tough and more easy for the end users. And I think that we'll be there, and pretty shortly. Thank you.
Yeah, 100%. I think, the point you touched on with value transfer is such an important one when it comes to Web3 gaming specifically, because, if you think about an item that may have a value of 50 cents or $1, in a traditional sense, you're not going to go on a forum and negotiate with people for hours to transfer that item. But through Web3, you maybe have much easier means of getting direct liquidity for that item, or executing that value transfer, and kind of going back to what John was saying about agents being able to do this. I think you're going to see value transfer become much easier, real money value transfer, and also certain regulatory rules that are in place maybe not need to be applied as much, because you won't have to custody assets and things like that. So I'm going to jump back to Spencer. I know. John, if you have something quick, feel free to
Yeah, it's
jump in.
quick.
I
It's
know
just
we have one more question.
the word "the," because we were talking about the value. But I think the thing you're going to see is different items have different value to different people, and so you always have value transfer. But what you're going to see is items are going to move around from where they're less valued to where they're more valued, and that's going to unlock even more productivity. So that's just a subtle point.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. And that's where, these cool, complex, permissionless systems come in to, or I guess permissioned systems come in to unlock that. So yeah, definitely. All right, Spencer, let's get that last question out.
All right, final question. So what excites you the most about bringing the racing genre into Web3?
I assume
And that's
that's for
for
me,
Dan
right?
Chen. Yeah, that's for you.
Okay, so I think the thing is like, there's so many racing games. And if you look at some of the different ones that are doing it in different ways, they kind of all follow the same pattern, right? And I honestly don't believe that there's a sustainable model that's a racing game. I don't think that you can go out there, create a racing game where there's winners and losers, and can generate enough turnover and can generate enough revenue to be sustainable as a game, and also to keep users engaged and sticky. There's just not enough there. And I think that you have to use like so many of these other things that feed into the racing game. Playing cards. If you win a race, you get a playing card. Once you get 5 playing cards, you open them up. If you get a pair of jacks or better, you win some coins or something. I don't know, whatever it may be, whatever you decide to do. It's like some of the things that we do in DNA. And I just wanted to throw one thing in there on the other side of that a little bit was we were talking a little bit about sustainability. And I think as a user should be asking, like, am I investing in this game, going to mint, giving this game my time for something that's going to be sustainable, something that's going to be long-term? And I don't think that question's asked enough. And it's definitively never answered enough, right? It's never truly answered. And I think as a founder needs to do the same thing. They need to look at the model that they're running. Because, I mean, you go to these games and you just see these founders just burning through cash, paying players to play, having huge tournaments, paying KOLs, destroying their own token price because they're giving KOLs millions of tokens to promote their game. And they have more employees than they have users and all these like problems. And like, you need to ask yourself, like, am I making something that's going to be good for users and going to benefit them? Am I making something that's going to be good for me and benefit me? So I think that that's like a big question that none of us are asking. And that should be the number one question. It should be the first thing in the fucking white paper, right? And the other thing, back to the subject of the racing thing, you can't, there's no other maps, right? Like, once you create a racing game, like, okay, they race, yay. You have to create so many more maps. Races mean something for, some cards you get. You can use those cards for items. Races earn you, cosmetics. You go up in progression levels. You earn trophies. All these things that you have to incorporate because you have to keep people racing. If people are willing to race and lose, you don't have a working model. If the only way for the game to continue and to last is for people to win, I mean, someone's got to fucking lose. So if someone's not losing and you don't have a way to sustain them with some magic jackpots that you hit, even if you lose, whatever it may be, you have to build something that's sustainable so that people will keep racing. And that also includes having a viable team that can reintroduce new maps, new racing methods, new graphics, new formulas, live operations to keep it fresh. All those things have to be continuously happening on a regular basis, or guess what? You'll be like the other 3,000 racing games that are gone, long gone.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to see how that plays out with what you guys are building, because I think, the experimentation part is what's often the most interesting thing about some of these, indie projects that are being built in Web3, that, experimentation today becomes a standard tomorrow. And that's what excites me, at least being part of this space early. John, I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just wondering, because I'm not like a game designer or builder. I'm wondering, for the people who are building games here, to what extent AI is being used to help work out some of these strategies. Like, just listening to the last speaker talk about his ideas that maybe it's impossible to build a racing game that hits all these conditions. And, AI is very good for planning. And I wonder to what extent people who are working on these strategies are talking to AIs to help try to balance, these different trade-offs against each other. And, whether you guys see that as something that's happening, on the game development side.
I use AI for ratings, like to rate different types of race formats, to see how long it's taking certain types of formats to fill. I use AI to take that data and kind of like, compile it all together, look at all the races that happened in the last month, and then tell me, okay, hey, these are the things that are hot. These are the things that people like to play.
Yeah, and I can speak to what we're doing with Legions. I know that since large language models have been front-facing, we've been using them for analysis, in various different parts of the production cycle. And now, there's more direct tooling for Unreal Engine that we're super excited on this kind of next pass of development in our game to really incorporate AI into the production pipeline. But, we're using it from everything to creative asset generation to balancing the game economy and how things scale. So yeah, I think it's going to be incredibly important, especially when it's a single developer or 10 developers. We're talking smaller studios where you don't have a in-game economics expert on staff. There's certain high level functions that AI can do much better than your casual game developer can in a much faster amount of time. With supervision, I think there's my experience, at least with AI and complex analytics, at least in the early days, it's gotten a lot better now, is that you still need to kind of really be checking what it's doing and making sure that what it's putting out matches what you were hoping when you were putting in. But I think as you get better at prompting and the AI gets better, we're going to see complete games designed, and we already are seeing complete games designed by AI. So good games will definitely get better, I think. All right, so we are going to wrap up. We are actually a little over on time today. So I want to say thank you so much to our guests. If you have not already followed all of our guests, please do. Check out their Twitters, check out their socials, check out their projects, follow along. We do this every week. If you are interested in hearing more about Web3 gaming and the metaverse. But again, a huge, huge thank you to all of our guests, and we will be doing this again next week. So please hop back on. I'm looking forward to continuing to talk to all of our guests here to see if there's ways we can work together. And yeah, just looking forward to Space in general. And I almost forgot again. We have our winner of 5 Satoshi's crystals, and it is, hold on, drum roll please. We could do a real drum roll, but for now we'll do an imaginary drum roll because I need to look up who it. All right, here it is. The radio radioed in and told me who it was. So congratulations to Underworld Dogma Cats, one of our longtime members of the community. You know where to find us. You know how to claim your crystals and how to use them. So congratulations. We will see you next week, and we will keep doing this. Thanks again to all the guests, and we're going to wrap it up. Please do go and check them out.
All right, thanks. Bye, everybody.
Cheers. Have a great week.
Bye, guys.